Why did they paint Spitfires pink? Well, apparently it was something to do with camouflage. Might be a bit of a strange camouflage, but that's the colour that helps them blend in with clouds. Or so they say. Hello everyone, I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and join me on the workbench today as I build and review the Supermarine Spitfire Mk.I PR in 144th scale from Beacon Models. Let's get this one down onto the workbench. Because this is such a small kit, I'm going to jump straight into it. If you'd like to have a deeper dive inside of the bag of this kit, check out my unboxing video which I completed to explore some of the latest releases from Beacon Models a little while ago. In this video I'm going to be exploring this specific kit with a focus on what the kit is like to build and rounding off with a review at the end. As usual, I'll pop a list of the products I used during this build on the screen here to give you an idea of the kind of things to go and get if you fancy replicating a similar project. And without any further ado, let's start the build. So this comes as a bagged offering featuring one sprue for one aircraft, but you do get the choice of two different paint schemes. For the most part, the mold quality is pretty good, but there was a little bit of flash on the clear parts which would need cleaning up. You do get a choice of different canopies depending on the version that you are replicating, but in this, the photo reconnaissance version, I need the ones with the blisters on the side. As normal, I'll cut the parts that I need from the sprue using my cutters and then clean up any rough areas using a sanding stick or a sharp knife. Fortunately, there isn't that much flash, so this was a relatively quick process. Tamiya extra thin cement will be my glue of choice throughout this project, and the first step was to install the pilot's seat and control panel into the fuselage wall of the cockpit. To paint the cockpit green, I'm going to use this Hataka Interior Grey Green. This is technically an airbrush ready paint, but I decided it would be quicker to hand paint it on. This was done straight onto the bare plastic with a couple of thin layers just to build up the opacity. It's not a very big cockpit and you're not going to see a great deal through the cockpit canopy, so I'm not too worried about being neat. To add a little bit of visual interest though, Humbrol 62, which is a leather colour, would be used on the pilot's backrest for his seat and also the headrest on the rear bulkhead. Humbrol 32, which is a dark grey, would be painted onto the control panel. After this, the two fuselage halves would be joined together and the fit is quite good, but I would spend a little bit of time just sanding down the seam just to make sure it was a little neater. Normally, the Spitfire Mk.I has an aerial mast just behind the cockpit. In this particular example though, the aerial mast was omitted, but I did install it and then cut away the mast so that the hole in the fuselage would be filled. Now I joined the wing onto the fuselage. I painted the internal surface of the wing in green, just in case it could be seen through the cockpit. The tail surfaces could then be glued into their slots at the back of the aircraft, and I did take a little bit of care just to make sure that they were nice and level. The engine exhausts would be glued into the nose of the aircraft. You could leave these off until the end of the build to make it easier to paint, but I think I'll be able to do that whilst they are in place. Flipping over to the other side of the aircraft, the various air intakes and radiators would be glued into their slots on the lower side. I then also installed the landing gear legs and doors, which come as a single piece, into their holes on the lower side. Given the single colour of my paint scheme, I thought it would be easier to paint them whilst they were in place. I will leave the wheels off for now though, as it will be easier to paint them separately. The correct canopy could then be glued onto the model as well, with a tiny amount of Tamiya extra thin allowed to wick into the seam, being used to hold it in place. This tiny amount of cement should hold it in position and not react with the plastic. An optional extra, which I have purchased separately, is the Beacon Models canopy mast set for this particular kit. They don't come included with the model, but they are reasonably cheap, retailing for £2.50, and you do actually get enough masks for 2 aircraft in the pack. So I'll definitely put the other set away if I have another example of this kit in the future. I would say it was a simple process to identify the correct piece of tape from the sheet, peel it off and stick it onto the cockpit canopy. Given the tiny size of the cockpit canopy and the various panels that need to be masked, this was a little bit fiddly. So I just took my time to carefully get them all in more or less the right places, and when that was done, it was time to move on. And now it's time to prime. I enjoy using this Army Painter matte black primer as it gives a fairly uniform finish and will help the subsequent layers of paint stick to it. The added benefit here is that the tyres will already be painted black, so I won't have to paint them again later. Thanks to the generous support of my Model Club members, I've actually been able to go out and purchase a specific paint set for this kit. This is the Hataka Orange Line RAF Photo Reconnaissance set. There are a variety of different photo reconnaissance themed paints in here. Given the nature of my particular kit, all I need is the pink one. So this PR pink would be loaded into the airbrush and thinned down with some lacquer thinner. I didn't go for any specific ratio, but it would probably be about 50-50. I then built this up over the entire model to try and give a fairly uniform finish. Given that I have used a black primer, it did take a couple of thin coats to build up the opacity of this pink, but actually it didn't take too long and I got to a point where I was happy. The added benefit of using a lacquer means that they dry quite quickly. I've not used the Hataka lacquers before, and I was fairly impressed and happy with these results. Vallejo black can be used here to paint the blades on the propeller and also the wheel on the tail of the aircraft. Humbrol number 24, which is a trainer yellow, would be used to carefully pick out the tips of the propeller blade just to point out where the dangerous spinny bits are. Vallejo aluminium would be painted onto the landing gear legs on both the tail and on the main gear, and I would also use it as the base coat for the engine exhausts. The hubs of the wheels would also be carefully picked out using this colour. For the engine exhausts, I'm going to apply a very thin coat of this dirty down rust effect. I'm not trying to make the engine exhaust look rusty, but a little bit more burnt. So I have thinned this down with a little bit of water to make almost a glaze, and this would be carefully painted onto the engine exhaust to try and give that effect. And that's pretty much it for the painting stage, so let's move on to the decals. So you get one small sheet of decals included in this kit, but as mentioned, it does feature two different paint schemes. You get enough to complete both paint schemes, but as only one kit is included in the box, I will put the other set aside and save them for another project perhaps. These are printed by Cartograph and are to a lovely quality. I cut the sheet into more manageable sizes and then dipped them into some warm water to help release them from the backing paper. And do you ever get confused between your cup of tea on your workbench and your brush water? Well, I do, and I needed a solution for that. So if you pop onto my merch store, you can get your own brush water mug, and you should never make that mistake again. It's actually clean water in there today. Doesn't look too bad. I wouldn't drink it though. Still wouldn't drink it. To help soften the decals into the surface, I'm going to use some VMS Decal Set and Fix. This was painted onto the areas where the decals were going to be applied, and then the decal was carefully slid into position. It is a bit weird putting the roundels as far in as they go on this kit, but being unusual, it does make it look visually interesting. Given that this is 1/144th scale, some of the stencils are pretty small, but they are printed really nicely and I didn't have any problems applying them to the model. I also didn't bother applying a gloss varnish or anything to the surface of this kit because the paint surface is already quite smooth. So fingers crossed I don't get any silvering on these decals in the finished build. The decal application stage wasn't too complex and didn't take too long. It was just a little bit fiddly given the small scale. I think it is worth pointing out that the cameras for this photo reconnaissance version are represented by decals, which is probably the most sensible way of doing it on such a small kit. With the decals in place, some VMS decal softener would be painted over the top to further soften them into the surface details. This should help give the impression that they were painted on and hide any of that decal film. And when that was done, this K-Colors XW1 Ultra Matte Varnish would be misted over the aircraft to help dull down any glossiness and give a more uniform finish to the aircraft. It's also going to help seal those decals into the surface. Whilst I've still got this matte varnish in the airbrush, a few drops of this black paint would be added as well. I'm going to try and simulate some engine smoke staining on the sides of the nose. I would do this by dropping the pressure for the airbrush and then streaking it in the direction of airflow to try and build up the effect. I would also do this a little bit on the bottom as well, around those radiators and things. But I didn't do it around the gun ports because my thought being that this was a photo reconnaissance version, it would probably try and avoid combat. When that paint was dry, the previously painted wheels could be added onto their legs on the landing gear, and do make sure you put them on the right way around because they have a flattened edge to simulate weight pushing through the wheels. The previously painted propeller was glued onto the nose of the model, and then the final step was to carefully remove the canopy masks, and despite the small size of them, I think they've done a reasonably good job. And with that, I'm going to call my build of the Beacon Models PR Spitfire in 144 scale complete. And that's another build under the belt. But before I get into my review and summary of this particular kit, let's hear from a couple of other modelers who've also built some Pink Spitfires. Over to you.
The Pink Spitfire has been a project that myself and VFC have talked about for so long, and when we finally came to do it, or more accurately I must say when I finally came around to do it, Model Minutes also joined in all that fun, and so now all three of us are making lovely Pink Spitfires. My one is the IBG Spitfire, and I actually did a video unboxing the kit talking about how it's a rather expensive Spitfire. But have my thoughts changed from building it? Well, you're going to have to check out my video, won't you? Oh, and make sure you check out the other two videos. Depending on whose you're watching right now, that's either Model Minutes or VFC. Let the Pink Spitfires reign supreme. Now, back to your scheduled viewing.
Hello everybody, Captain VFC here to talk briefly about my experience with the kit you see behind me, the Supermarine Spitfire FR9C by Kovazovity Prostyov. The actual construction of the kit was perfectly fine. It's fairly middle of the road. It's 2012 tooling, so it's not particularly old, but it's very typical of KP in that it is absolutely fine. It's not outstanding. It's just absolutely fine. The only problems I really encountered were with the decals. There was a stencil sheet included which just disintegrated in water, and then the regular decals which went in the same water did not disintegrate, but there's some slight registration issues and some slight colouring issues, particularly with the blue. Aside from that, the only other, shall we say, quirk of the kit is that despite being 1/72nd scale, it doesn't actually have a camera lens in the fuselage, it just has a small black circular decal, which is a bit lazy if you think about it. And in line with quite a few Spitfires, especially those from smaller manufacturers, it's moulded with clipped wings, and to put the regular wings or the lengthened high altitude wings, you need to chop the wingtip off and then glue the new wingtip on. There is no locating point or plug or any way of knowing that this is going to fit. You just have to eyeball it and hope. Overall though, I'm quite happy with the result. It's painted in Vallejo's interpretation of photo reconnaissance pink, which is not too vibrant. It's quite a pleasant pink, as Pink Spitfires go, but being a later mark of Spitfire does have some invasion stripes, which I feel just break it up somewhat, make it a little less monotone, but overall a fairly pleasant experience with a reasonable result at the end of it, so something that I'm fairly happy with. Thank you for listening to my thoughts, and thank you to Model Minutes for partaking in a little Pink Spitfire buddy build. I'm very excited to see what your contribution looks like. If you want to see more from me, don't forget to find my channel on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Hopefully, I'll see you in another video. Goodbye.
So yeah, thanks to Captain VFC and Ms. Modeler for sharing their fantastic builds and their experiences with their own versions of a Pink Spitfire. And if you'd like to check out those videos, I'll drop a link to them in the description below. In my case, I think I probably had the easier of all of the options, given that I went for such a small scale, and the kit doesn't feature that many parts. In total, this kit features 32 parts, but actually you don't need all of them because it includes different options such as wings for a Mk.II-B, 2 different canopy options, and even things such as propellerless spinners, so you could display this in a flying pose. This aircraft does come with the option to have raised landing gear as well, but no pilot is included. But Beacon Models does have a 3D print of a pilot in a chair which you could install instead to give that impression, but that's something you would have to purchase separately. So talking about some of the negatives first, I think maybe the level of flash on the clear parts was a little bit disappointing, but it wasn't unmanageable. There was a little bit of cleaning up in a few places that needed to occur, but for the most part it was fairly straightforward. And whilst this kit does feature some lovely detail, as we move forwards in time, those recessed panel lines do look a little bit thick, which is why I didn't bother using a wash or any other weathering like that, and instead opted to let natural light cause shadows there to bring out those elements. As I explored in a previous build of this kind of model kit though, if you hand paint this, those recessed details do get filled in a little bit by the thicker paint. But that's pretty much it for the negative aspects. There are a lot of positive aspects about this kit. I do think the level of detail is really quite good, and the fit of the parts was really quite pleasant. This kit doesn't take long to build at all, you can make really quick progress, and I really enjoy the high quality aspects such as the cartograph decals and the ability to purchase canopy masks separately, and they're not expensive either, and you get 2 of those in the set. This kit does come with a couple of options, in particular the fact that there is a second paint scheme included if you prefer to do that one. But this tooling is also used to replicate different versions of the Spitfire, and there are other versions of this kit available which depict those different variants. So if my recollection is correct, the tooling date for this kit goes back to 2022. And given that we have a good level of detail, recessed panel lines, and the fit of the parts was really quite good, these are the standards that we expect today from a model kit, and I have no doubt that in a smaller scale these things are harder to replicate. The version I have here was released in 2025, and at the time I'm making this video was still available on their website at a recommended retail price of £9.95. So just shy of a tenner. I don't think that's too bad of a price for what you get inside of the kit, and some of the quality features that we've seen. Perhaps in future releases though, the masks could be included in the kit and not an optional extra, because I imagine many modelers would love to be able to mask their kit straight away. And I don't believe that masking it by hand would be a particularly enjoyable experience. I know I wouldn't have done that, which is why I went for the masks. But the masks themselves are pretty decent, and I believe they're actually manufactured by Pee-Wit, so you know, again, you're getting a quality product. So I do keep a note of everything that I do in my modelling journal. These are books, they're like workbench companions. You just keep a note of what you do in there, and if you'd like to get your hands on your own copies, you can check out Amazon and you just make a note of everything that you did. I use it because it's quite handy to keep a log of all of the different products that I've used. In here it did take me just 2 days to complete, and my main comment that I've written here was that it was a pleasant and quick build. Yeah, and if you're just looking for a Mojo build, just something simple, something easy to do, something that isn't going to break the bank, I think this is a good choice. And of course, if you don't want a Pink Spitfire, you can pick a variety of different ones from the choices that they have available. And with that, I think I'm going to leave this one here. This was a reasonably quick and pleasant build. Definitely a kit that I'll explore building again in the future because I have some different versions to do, and I'm looking forward to getting those onto the workbench as well. Once again, big thank you to Captain VFC and Ms. Modeler for contributing their thoughts on their own Pink Spitfire builds, and you can check out those ones in the links in the description. Don't forget that we do have a Model Minutes Model Club, and if you'd like to join the Model Club like these members on screen and get exclusive access to early videos and other perks, check out the links below the video as well. Massive thanks to these Model Club members on the screen here for helping me to create consistent content. There are other ways to help support the channel if you prefer, but the best way to support the channel for free is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time. Pink Spitfire, take one. Oh, it's a bit loud actually. This is going to be one take. Why did they paint Can't do words today. Let's hear from a couple of other oh my word, why can't I use words?